my understanding is, and three dots. Okay, my understanding is, and three dots. I want you to remember those two things. Sounds ridiculous, sounds pretty weird. I'll explain it in just a minute. This is in reference to the declarations that were made by former Minneapolis police officers in the lawsuit that Katie Blackwell brought against Alpha News because of their claim, because of the fall in Minneapolis, because of her claim that they, injured her. It was a civil lawsuit. She was claiming that they, hurt her career because they claimed that she lied on the stand. She perjured herself on the stand. They made it look like that in the fall of Minneapolis. Unfortunately, she filed a lawsuit, which was a bullshit lawsuit. It wasn't, BS to claim that Alpha News changed they edited the footage to make it look like Katie Blackwell said something that she didn't. And that's absolutely true. They did. It was manipulative. It was, they edited it to make her look bad, and they've gotten away with it. A lot of people still believe that Katie Blackwell perjured herself when she testified in the trial of Derek Chauvin. And unfortunately, she got some bad legal advice. And some attorneys from a law firm that said that they could represent her, and they did. And she quickly had to dismiss the lawsuit, and she had to pay like $75,000 in attorney's fees for Alpha News. Now, what I want to look at today, and I've been looking at these for a while, I just haven't had the time to do this, is the declarations that these former Minneapolis police officers signed in this lawsuit. When the lawsuit was brought, Alpha News got 34 Minneapolis police officers to sign declarations. And 14 of them, in their declarations, it claims that they believed that Katie Blackwell perjured herself on the stand. Now, this is where my understanding is, and the three dots come into place. Now, if you didn't watch her testimony, which is now quite a while ago, and if you didn't watch the fall of Minneapolis, then you don't know what I'm talking about. But I'm going to play the little snippet that they played in the fall of Minneapolis of her testimony, just to refresh your memory. So here's this.
I'd like to show you what's been received as Exhibit 17. Is this a trained technique that's by the Minneapolis Police Department when you were overseeing the training unit?
It is not.
And how does this differ?
I don't know what kind of improvised position that is. So that's not what we train.
Okay, so that is the actual footage from the fall of Minneapolis. That's the little piece of her testimony. She testified for like 38 minutes, and they played 29 seconds of her testimony right there, okay? Now let's compare that to this exact piece of testimony from the real footage from trial. So this is that exact piece without anything cut out.
I'd like to show you what's been received as Exhibit 17. I need to ask you, officer, as you look at Exhibit 17, is this a trained technique that's by the Minneapolis Police Department when you were overseeing the training unit?
It is not.
And why not?
Well, use of force according to policy has to be consistent with MPD training. And what we train are neck restraints, the conscious and unconscious neck restraint. So per policy, a neck restraint is compressing one or both sides of the neck using an arm or leg, but what we train is using one arm or two arm to do a neck restraint.
And how does this differ?
I don't know what kind of improvised position that is. So that's not what we train.
See the difference? Quite a bit of difference there. Okay? They cut out that whole explanation that she gave, and they spliced the footage together to make it look like she just said, I don't know what that is. We don't train that. She described what a neck restraint is. She thought that that was a neck restraint. Now, if you've ever followed this and you've watched any of my videos on this, or you've watched The Fall of Minneapolis, or JC Chaix going on all these podcasts, and JC Chaix and Liz Collin going on all these podcasts talking about this. Liz Collin still talks about this all the time. This is like her shining star. This is the one thing that she's done that just really, she always brings up. She brings this back up. And they talk about MRT and how this is MRT, and Derek Chauvin did MRT and he was doing it textbook and all that kind of stuff. And they say that Katie Blackwell perjured herself by saying that MRT isn't part of the training, at that time, it's no longer something that they can do by policy, but it was by policy a move that you could do to restrain somebody. And they claim that she, in that little snippet that they cut down, that she was saying that MRT was not something that they could use per policy. Now, if you watch the rest of her testimony, she's never asked about MRT, but it doesn't matter to Alpha News, doesn't matter to Liz Collin, doesn't matter to Dr. JC Chaix. That's the truth. It doesn't matter to them. They wanted to make her look bad, and so they found a place where they could splice that, cut that and splice that, and make it look like she said something that she didn't. Okay, and so this is where the lawsuit comes in. Katie Blackwell got a lot of heat for this because in The Fall of Minneapolis, they claim that she lied, that she didn't know what MRT is, or she perjured herself and lied and said that that wasn't a technique. Now, she, again, was saying that this looked like a neck restraint, except that that's not the type of neck restraint that they train. And you certainly don't kneel on somebody for 9.5 minutes. So that's the biggest part of this, is that I don't know what that is, but he did it for 9.5 minutes. That was way egregious. And in none of this have they ever got any cops to claim that what Derek Chauvin did was a legitimate move for the period of time that he did it, okay? That nobody has ever claimed that what he did was justified, okay? So that's all these little smoke and mirrors. Smoke and mirrors is what they did. And I don't really know why Alpha News, Liz Collin, and JC Chaix really want to back Derek Chauvin on this. I don't really know why that they want to do that, but they've done it, and now they're stuck. They have to. Liz Collin produced The Fall of Minneapolis. JC Chaix wrote The Fall of Minneapolis. So was it JC Chaix who wrote that? He, of course, edited her book, They're Lying, George Floyd, whatever the title of the book is. I even have it here. The media, the left, and the death of George Floyd, something like that. He was the editor of her book. At some point after she got fired from WCCO, and she decided to write this book, she met JC Chaix, and he decided that, he said, hey, I can edit your book, and then, hey, I can write this, The Fall of Minneapolis, for you based on the book. Okay, now the lawsuit is the biggest part of this. And what did I say? The things that you need to remember are from my understanding, or my understanding is the first one, and 3 dots. Okay, so in these declarations, Alpha News got all these cops to declare either that they thought that she perjured herself, or just declare things like, we used the knee on the neck restraint. That was by policy. That was something that we trained. Katie Blackwell was the head of training back in 2019, starting a year before the George Floyd incident. She was the head of training. And so they either claimed that she perjured herself, or they claimed that, MRT was part of policy. It was a legitimate move, and using your knee on the back of somebody's neck or shoulder blade area was part of that, getting somebody into that restraint. Okay. So, but the interesting thing about this is there's basically 3 of these declarations, and really there's only 2. And then there's one special one as far as this goes. So let me show you the basic one is, let me share my screen here. Basic one is this. It looks like this. Now, this is Matthew Albers. I don't know who Matthew Albers is, but this is, let me make sure you can see it. Okay. Matthew Albers, declaration of Matthew Albers in the case of Katie Blackwell versus Liz Collin as an individual, Dr. JC Chaix as an individual, Alpha News. This is his declaration. And in that, you can see he says, I worked for Minneapolis from 2002 to 2020. And this is the part that I want you to look at, okay? They say, MRT, during my training at MPD, I was trained that MRT included a hobble restraint, part of MRT, hobble process. I was trained that MRT included a knee on the neck or upper shoulder blade area as a restraint, which is shown in this photograph right here. And of course, this photograph also says, sudden cardiac arrest typically occurs immediately following a violent struggle. Place the person in the recovery position, which of course didn't come out in trial, didn't come out in the fall of Minneapolis, is clearly right there, and any officer anywhere knows what the recovery position is, but that was never talked about, okay? Here is the crux of what I think is just crazy. Now, that these can be considered legal documents. Now, it's just a declaration. You can declare basically anything. So here it is. My understanding, this is what I want you to see. My understanding is that Katie Blackwell testified regarding an image of Derek Chauvin with his knee on George Floyd's neck. As shown in the below questions, was asked by attorney, and Blackwell's answers. So look at the wording of this, because the wording is what I'm getting at here. My understanding is that Katie Blackwell testified regarding an image of Derek Chauvin with his knee on George Floyd's neck, as shown in the below questions asked by an attorney, and Blackwell's answers given under oath. Why is that such a weird statement? Well, the first thing is, my understanding is, right? My understanding means that somebody else told me something, and that's my understanding of what happened. If they watched Katie Blackwell testify, if they watched her full testimony, then they would just say, I watched Katie Blackwell testify. But they don't say that. They don't say that in any one of 33 of these declarations. Now, remember, there are 34 of them. One person did say that, and I'll get to that in a minute. My understanding is, therefore, somebody told you something or you saw something, and in this case, I'm going to claim that they watched the fall of Minneapolis. And why am I going to claim that? Because of this. Okay? Question. It doesn't say what attorney asked the question either. Why is that important? Because the questions are actually coming from the prosecutor. Okay? The prosecutor asked all those questions. If you saw in the videos that I just played, that's the prosecutor. Okay? The defense attorney doesn't talk about these things at all, does not ask Katie Blackwell any questions about the use of force. Okay? So here, question by the prosecuting attorney, but I'd like to show you what's been received as Exhibit 17. Just like you heard when I played these, I'm going to ask you, officer, as you look at Exhibit 17, is this a technique that's by the Minneapolis Police Department when you were overseeing the training unit? Blackwell, it is not. Dot, dot, dot. What does that mean? That's the whole chunk that they took out. This is directly from the fall of Minneapolis. This is not somebody who went back and watched testimony. This is not somebody who watched the testimony live. This is somebody who watched the fall of Minneapolis or was just presented with this sheet of paper and said that, look, this is what she testified to with these 3 dots in there that are very clear. That's the whole chunk that they didn't play in the fall of Minneapolis, that they're not showing here in their declaration. And there you go. It is not, Blackwell says. Question. How does this differ? I don't know what kind of improvised position that is. So that's not what we train, okay? My understanding is this is what Katie Blackwell testified to. This is my declaration now, okay? Then, number 9, if by we, Katie Blackwell referred to the MPD, then I believe that she perjured herself. We were trained to hold people down until we had the restraint in place. We were also trained that if a person can talk, they can breathe. Okay, that has nothing to do with the, so that's what every one of these says. Okay? Every one of the declarations that claims perjury reads exactly like that. So there's 14 of them that are like, I'm sorry, there are 13 of them like that. I told you that there's one that's different. There's one that's special, right? So here is the other way. Now there's some nuances to this. There's some different people must have put these together themselves if they chose to. So this person is only declaring that I was trained in MRT. MRT used a hobble. It was a process. I trained that MRT included a knee to the neck or upper shoulder restraint, just shown in this picture again. And that's it. So that's all. I didn't share that with you. I need to share that with you so that you can see the difference here. So here, this is so this is the other kind of declaration. I apologize for that. This is the one that does not claim perjury. They're only declaring that knee on the neck restraint was something that we did in using MRT, and MRT required the hobble, which they didn't ever use in the real world. In the George Floyd incident, they didn't. But yeah, I was trained in MRT because the gaslighting from Alpha News and from the fall of Minneapolis is that this was they were doing MRT. And Katie Blackwell is lying and saying that MRT wasn't part of training. Well, as you saw in her testimony there, they didn't ask her about MRT. They asked her about that position. She thought it looked like a neck restraint. And so she described that that's not a neck restraint that we train. These are the neck restraints that we do train. So that's the other type of the majority of these declarations. Now, the one special declaration is here. And this declaration was by Robert Kroll, also known as Bob Kroll, husband of Liz Collin. They got married in like 2018. Okay, Bob Kroll also, those declarations by all the other officers were 2 pages, I think. Maybe some of them went into 3 pages. Here, Bob Kroll's declaration is 23 pages long. Okay, but here's the difference. I watched Katie Blackwell's testimony in the Derek Chauvin trial. Among other things, she testified that MPD did not train by putting a knee on the upper back side of the neck of the subject. That testimony was false. And I am confident Katie Blackwell knows it was false at the time she said it. She didn't say that we don't train to put the knee on the... Nobody fleshed this out. Nobody asked any additional questions. She was talking about that particular moment in time when we all know that Derek Chauvin had been on George Floyd for minutes at that point, and they were not getting him in the MRT, in the maximal restraint technique with the hobble. They were not doing that. Derek Chauvin was just kneeling down on him. That's what she was talking about. If the defense attorney wanted to ask those clarifying questions, he could have. He didn't do that. She did not perjure herself. She answered the prosecutor's question and was never asked any additional questions about MRT or use of force. Bob Kroll says that he thought that her testimony was false and that she knew it was false. Well, I think Bob Kroll is full of shit. Okay? Bob Kroll is married to Liz Collin. Bob Kroll said just after George Floyd died and he watched the video of Derek Chauvin, that was unjustified. There's a video of it, and he even includes the entire transcript with him and Mr. DeRusha, and I have Jason DeRusha from WCCO sat down with Bob Kroll, Officer Rick Walker Sr., Sergeant Cheryl Schmidt, and Sergeant Anna Hedberg. And I have talked about this video as well. I have done a video about this as well. Bob Kroll says that it was despicable. It shouldn't have ever happened. That Derek Chauvin should not have done what he did. That wasn't justified. That wasn't a justified use of force. So he went on the news, he was interviewed, and said that that position was not, that use of force was not justified. But then he let his wife make the fall of Minneapolis and make all these claims in the fall of Minneapolis. And he even wrote a declaration where at the first part, he said that he thought Katie Blackwell perjured herself and, made false statements about the knee on the neck restraint. But then he includes this whole thing about how this is what he said to Jason DeRusha about how it wasn't justified. It shouldn't have happened. It never should have happened. It was not good. And here's the full. Looks like here's the full transcript that he adds here. It's 12 pages long of him saying that it was not justified. Isn't it crazy? It's crazy. It's crazy to me that Bob Kroll doesn't have the balls to tell his wife that we can't make this. This is bullshit. What you said and what Dr. JC Chaix has written into this, the fall of Minneapolis, is all bullshit. It's wrong. And yet Bob Kroll lays down and allows his wife to continue doing this. And she keeps doing it. I mean, she was on a podcast with a local Minneapolis podcaster within the last year. And this whole thing, the whole thing, of course, came up again because that's kind of her, again, that's her one moment really in time, is that the fall of Minneapolis and all the notoriety that they got from that. And they've got tens of millions of views, 10, 15 million views on the fall of Minneapolis. So it's a big deal for them. Now, the reason that I even thought of this was that, of course, they came out with another documentary, Minnesota Mao, I guess is the name of it, and it's about Walz, Governor Tim Walz. And in that, I guess they featured Tu Tao, who was the second most senior officer on scene at the Derek Chauvin scene. And Tu Tao was the guy who was talking to the crowd and telling the crowd to stay back, the minimal crowd that they were, who was all telling Derek Chauvin and Tu Tao, check on George Floyd, just check on him. And Bob Kroll, in his interview with Jason DeRusha, said, yeah, I mean, people are telling you to check on this guy, and they're not. Like, that's not okay. That's not justified. It should have never happened. But Liz Collin gets Tu Tao. I mean, Tu Tao, I feel bad for the guy, but he didn't do his job, and he got a couple years in prison because he sat there. He's a 9-year cop, 9-year veteran cop in Minneapolis. And you work in Minneapolis, you see some shit, right? You go call to call in Minneapolis. You have experience. You should know better. And he didn't. He didn't know what the heck he was doing, or he didn't have the balls to tell Derek Chauvin to get off him. I don't know what the situation was, but they keep dragging him back out so that he can say, how unjust the system is and all that kind of stuff. You don't remember who Tu Tao was? He was this guy who told people don't do drugs and to stay back and all that kind of stuff, while George Floyd was dying under Derek Chauvin. So these declarations have driven me nuts for a while. I mean, more than a year. When I looked at them, I'm like, oh my God, all of these officers were fed the lines from The Fall of Minneapolis, or they watched The Fall of Minneapolis, and then they were asked to write a declaration. And 14 of them bit and said she perjured herself. 14 of them. Now, 20 of them didn't and only said that they were trained in MRT. Katie Blackwell was the the head training officer during the time that I worked there, or around the time, just before George Floyd and all that. 20 of them did that. But 14 of them, and each and every one of them, have that 3 dots in there. My understanding, not I watched her testimony. My understanding was that this happened. And then 3 dots where Katie Blackwell is describing what she thought was a neck restraint, which is what she thought that Derek Chauvin was doing. Nobody had brought up MRT until kind of after the fact. I mean, it was brought up later in the trial as well, a little bit. But the fall of Minneapolis is when MRT became this big hot topic about how Katie Blackwell, lied. Now, the last thing that I want to do is leave you with who is Katie Blackwell, because they smear her repeatedly, okay? Liz Collin, remember who she is. Kind of a second-rate news anchor from WCCO. She got canned. She claims she got canned because she married Bob Kroll. And Bob Kroll was on the Minneapolis Police Department, and WCCO is really, really left-leaning, and they can't be supportive of cops, and they can't do the investigations that she thought that they should, and so they canned her, right? So that's Liz Collin. And here's JC Chaix. Remember this guy? He's got now that scarf that he's got in the pocket right there. Last picture I saw of him was at Christmas, I think, with Alpha News, and now he wears that scarf around his neck. I don't know. He's a knucklehead. He's an odd duck for many other things. And I will eventually tell you all about JC Chaix, but I can't tell you about it today. But who is Katie Blackwell? Let me share who Katie Blackwell is. This is from November 4th of 2020. I don't know what the dandelion effect, change your mindset from punishment to empowerment, Veterans Day. This was a gathering. Sergeant Major Katie M. Blackwell. Sergeant Major Katie M. Blackwell. At that time, in 2020, she had 23 years in the National Guard. She's a Sergeant Major, 34th Military Police Company. Okay. I am not military, so like reading all this stuff, I'll get lost but it's a lot, right? She's got a lot in here. As a command sergeant major in the 34th Infantry Division, headquarters of the Headquarters Battalion. Previous assignments include Brigade Operations Sergeant Major for 84th Troop Command. It just goes on and on and on. She has participated in numerous statewide activations, training missions in Germany and Norway, and deployment to Bosnia-Herzegovina and Iraq. Okay, Sergeant Major Blackwell was deployed for almost 2 years. She was the convoy escort team non-commissioned officer in charge and scout vehicle truck commander on 168 combat escort missions throughout the Iraqi theater. During combat operations, she was awarded the Purple Heart, Bronze Star, and Combat Action Badge. She worked for the Minneapolis Police Department. That's the only police department she's ever worked for. She has served as a homicide detective, supervisor for the SWAT crisis hostage negotiator team, violent crimes investigation team, assault, sex crimes, and narcotics investigator, violent offender task force, and patrol supervisor. That's who Katie Blackwell is. That's who Katie Blackwell is. Let me pull this up too from the webpage Medium, where people like write stuff. This is let me share this too. This is by Willem, who goes by Due Diligence. I've done a few interviews with Willem about different things, about the fall of Minneapolis and about Lacey Silliard from Bemidji Police Department. But here, just look at his statement here. Who is Katie Blackwell? 27 years. Oh boy. 2 of which were served in Iraq. She's a convoy escort team non-commissioned officer, just like I said. Purple Heart, Bronze Star, Combat Action Badge. She's also an ordained minister who provides free weddings for the homeless. There she is with her medals. This is who they smear. For what? They claim that she perjured herself when she clearly did not. She answered the question the prosecutor asked. The defense never asked her any questions about use of force. This is the hard part, right? Like, I like to say that we don't support bad cops because I don't support bad cops. So that's why I talk about Chauvin. When I hear Alpha News support him and say that he needs a pardon and how they screwed up and he didn't get a fair trial and all that kind of stuff, and he was just following policy, that's what Dr. JC Chaix claims, is that he was just following policy. He was doing a textbook MRT. JC Chaix had 5 years max of law enforcement experience. And here's a quote from Katie Blackwell. I would have preferred going back to Iraq and redoing the over 160 combat missions, ambushes, and IED attacks, and suffering again through all the fear, pain, and anguish I experienced in those situations, rather than go through what I knew would put me in a position of being subjected to the criticism of many of my peers for violating the golden, quote, unwritten rule of policing. Cops do not snitch on cops. We should. I think most do now. And snitch is a stupid word. You honestly say that, hey, what Chauvin did was wrong. That's very simple. Like, why would you protect a person like that? You should never. Why would you protect a person like Lacey Silliard, who tried to steal almost $100,000 from a vulnerable woman who was on her deathbed? I wouldn't. A good cop never would. Alpha News does. Liz Collin does. JC Chaix does. Katie Blackwell doesn't. So I support her. I would love to speak to her. Assistant Chief Blackwell, I would absolutely love to speak with you off the record, not recorded, anything. I would love to interview you too, but I understand that that would be probably too much because you have a job to do and you have a lot of scrutiny that you have to deal with from people like these knuckleheads. Liz Collin and JC Chaix. Well, they can go to hell. That's it for now. I'm Steve Loomis with Walking That Mile.